Hello again, my name's John. I'm a retired cook from the northeast of England in the UK, and welcome to another one of my video recipes. In this video I'm trying something a little different, something I've wanted to share for a long time, and that's winemaking. Now, if you're one of my regular viewers, don't worry, this new winemaking series is just something extra I've been wanting to share. I'll still be posting my usual baking and cooking tutorials as normal. I've been making and aging my own wines for years, and now I'm excited to pass along some of the tips, tricks and know-how I've picked up along the way. We'll start with an easy, approachable project, a Sauvignon Blanc wine kit, but don't be fooled by the word kit. These can produce an excellent wine that's perfect to get you started. Once you've got the basics down, we'll move on in future videos to making wines completely from scratch, using fruits like grapes, berries, bananas and more. It's a fascinating hobby and much easier than you might think. And as a bonus, you'll be pleasantly surprised at how much money you can actually save too. Okay, I'll quickly go through the equipment needed for this wonderful white wine. And this is the kit I've chosen for this lesson. More about that in a moment. And I'd also like to say I'm not being sponsored by this company at all. First is a siphoning tube. You will need one of these. This next item is optional for this lesson, and it's a hydrometer used for working out the specific gravity of your wine. For example, how much alcohol's in the final product. But I'll get more into that in future videos. For now, you don't really need one. Next, you will need an airlock, commonly known as a bubbler. More about those later. You'll also need something long enough to stir the wine. Some kind of thermometer is always very handy to have in winemaking. And you'll also need clean, sterilised bottles. I buy my bottles, but you can also recycle your bought wine empties. Finally, you do need a couple of these 23 litre or 5 imperial gallon fermentation containers. Right, let's see what's in the kit. First, the all-important instructions, which we'll go through together as we go through the process. First out of the box is a packet of French oak chips. These give the wine that oak barrel flavour. These two pouches are Sauvignon Blanc grape extra flavourings. And this is the wine yeast and nutrient pack. And this bottle is the important one. It's the concentrated Sauvignon Blanc grape juice, made from the real Sauvignon Blanc grape. Next is the wine stabiliser. More about the wine stabiliser when we get to the end of the fermentation process. Finally, you have 3 sachets of finings. These clarify the wine after the process. Apart from the water, 4 kilograms of sugar is the only other ingredient you need to provide yourself. Okay, day 1. First job, it's really important to make sure everything is clean and sterilised before starting the process. Next job is to measure out and get 5 litres, that's 1 gallon of hot water into your sterilised fermentation bin. But make sure it's no hotter than 53 degrees Celsius, that's 127 Fahrenheit. Once the hot water's in the bin, you can add your 4 kilograms, that's 8 pound 13 ounces of sugar. But don't dump it all in at once. Do it in 4 passes, making sure each one is dissolved before adding the next lot. You can use proper brewing sugar if you wish, and it is indeed called brewing sugar. But to be honest, I've had no problems at all using the cheaper ordinary granulated sugar. And a very quick mention to the channel's Patreon, PayPal and Super Thanks supporters. I'll do the name splash and shout out a little later in the video. Right, back to the instructions again. Once your sugar is completely dissolved, you can add the pure concentrated grape juice and stir it in for a few seconds. And once again, this juice is made from the actual Sauvignon Blanc grape. Don't forget to rinse out the bottle with cold tap water and add that too. And we're on to number 6 in the instructions. Next job. Using cold tap water, fill up the bin to the 23 litre or 5 gallon mark. And if you don't have marks on the side of your fermentation bin, use measuring jugs to accurately add the cold water. The temperature of your water now should be at 22 Celsius, that's 72 Fahrenheit. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to take a reading of the liquid with my hydrometer, just so I can show you the alcohol content at the end of the process. But like I said earlier, if you don't have or understand a hydrometer, just skip this part. We'll get more into it later on in the series, but for now just take a note of my reading of 1.080, and this reading is known as the OG, or original gravity. Time to set the wine away by adding the yeast and nutrients and the French oak chips. Just sprinkle on the yeast, followed by the oak chips. But please don't worry about lumps of wood floating about your wine. That all sinks to the bottom when we reach the clearing stage. Once they're in, give it a good stir, then get the lid on the bin. Now, if I was making fresh fruit wine from scratch, I would normally add the airlock to the lid of the bin at this point. But these wine kits tend to become very active, and the bubbler can't release the gas quick enough. I've even had the bin lids blow off under the built-up pressure. So, for the first couple of days, I simply place a bottle cap over the airlock hole. This just stops any foreign bodies or insects getting in. Okay, we're on day 2, so let's check in and see how things are coming along. You can already see the fermentation has started. And the great thing is, as it ferments, a layer of CO2 forms over the top of the wine. That gas barrier helps stop airborne bacteria and other contaminants from getting into the wine. Day 3, and it's still very active, so I'm going to leave the airlock off for another day and see what it's like on day 4. That CO2 gas barrier is still protecting the wine, so it's pretty safe to give it another day with just the bottle top on. Okay, only 7 minutes into the video and we're already on day 4. And as you can see, it's been very active over the last 24 hours. It's even moved the bottle cap a bit, but it does seem to have settled down a bit now. So I'll get the lid washed and sterilised and back on the bin. There you go, that looks much better. Now this time it looks settled down enough to use the bubbler or airlock. How the airlock works is that you add a little water with a drop of sterilising solution in it. And all it does is allow the gas to escape, but not let any air or bacteria into the bin. And there is the airlock in action. Day 5, and the bubbles are running at about 3 seconds apart. Just gotta let it run until those bubbles just about stop altogether. Day 6, and those bubbles are about 7 seconds apart now. Day 7, and the fermentation is starting to slow right down now. If you're not sure what's happening here, the yeast is consuming the sugars in the juice and uses them as energy. And that process breaks the sugars down and releases 2 main byproducts. One is carbon dioxide, which is coming through the bubbler, and the other is alcohol. Okay, day 8. And the fermentation process has finally finished, or should I say it slowed right down enough to move on to the next stage. All that sugar has now been turned into CO2 gas and alcohol. Give your wine a little taste if you like. It should now be quite dry and not sweet at all. I'll do another reading at this point, and once again, if you don't have a hydrometer, don't worry about it for this lesson. If you want to make a note of this final reading, known as the FG or final gravity, it's 0.988. And I'll show you the calculation to work out the alcohol content when we start bottling the wine a little later. Right, we're still on day 8 by the way. Now that the fermentation's finished, there's quite a bit more to do today. The first job is to add the wine stabiliser. This stops the fermentation process completely and prevents re-fermentation when it's bottled. It also helps preserve the wine's flavour during storage. Now, using a whisk or a large spoon, vigorously stir or whisk the wine on and off for a few minutes. 1, to dissolve the stabiliser, but it's mainly to get rid of that CO2 gas that's in the wine. Like shaking a bottle of pop until it goes flat. This helps considerably when it comes to clearing the wine later. And one thing I should have mentioned earlier, ignore the day numbers on the sheet. They're based on perfect conditions. In reality, it always takes longer. Next, you can add the 2 extra flavouring sachets. These enhance the Sauvignon Blanc characteristics in the wine. Now give those a gentle stirring. Finally, we need to add the wine finings. These 3 sachets will clear the wine. Start by adding number 1 sachet to the wine and give it a quick stir. Get the lid on the bin and let it stand for 1 hour. When the time's up, you can add number 2 sachet. This is the largest of the 3. Once again, give it a gentle stir, get the lid back on the bin and let it stand for another hour. Okay, once the time's up, you can add the last sachet, number 3. Now give that one a stir for about 10 seconds too, then get the lid back on. Now, before it starts clearing, I need to get the bin onto a raised surface, where it will sit for at least 24 hours. We raise it now so we can siphon it later without disturbing the settled sediment after it clears. On to day 9. If your wine isn't perfectly clear after 24 hours, just give it another day or so. It will clear eventually if you've done everything right. You can pause the video and read instruction 16. It's basically saying sterilise your siphoning tubes in second bin and be careful not to disturb the sediment. If you look closely at the bottom of my bin, you can see the layer of sediment and wood chips that settled there. Mine's nice and clear and ready to siphon off into the second clean and sterilised wine bin. You need a siphoning tube with a 30 cm or 12-inch rigid plastic pipe and a sediment trap attached to the end. Carefully lower the tube into the wine, leaving it a couple of inches short of the bottom. Now suck the wine up through the tube and let it siphon into the second bin. Don't worry about getting any germs in the tube from your mouth. The alcohol in the wine will take care of that. When you get near the bottom, very gently and slowly tip the bin towards you as shown, keeping a close eye on that moving sediment. Soon as you hear that gurgling sound, lift out the tube. It's inevitable that you'll lose about 1.5 to 2 bottles of wine to the sediment, despite the kit's claims that it's a 30 standard bottle recipe. I've never had more than 28. Now get the lid on the bin and lift it up onto the top bench again. You can start bottling now if you wish, but I like to leave mine for an extra 24 hours, and I'll repeat the last siphoning stage. Before I move on to day 10, I hope you don't mind if I give my 5 recipe books, including my brand new 5th recipe book, a quick shout out. This latest release features 12 all new bread recipes not found in any of my previous 4 books, along with even more recipes for air fryers, pies, cakes and desserts. The book also includes interactive elements such as QR codes linking directly to step-by-step video tutorials for each recipe. And you'll find links for all 5 books in the description below the video. Okay, it's day 10. I've already repeated my second siphoning stage and mine is absolutely crystal clear. And it's now ready to bottle. Now you can have a taste of your wine. If it's a bit too dry for you, you can back sweeten your wine with a little sugar. Just follow instruction 17 on the list. Okay, it's finally time to start bottling the wine. Get your siphoning tube into the bin all the way down to the bottom this time. You don't need the sediment trap anymore. I like to clamp the tube to the side of the bin, then I can use 2 hands when bottling. These little tap valves are really handy when it comes to bottling your wine. Open the tap, suck the wine through, then close the tap. Right, that's the tube loaded, the clean bottles are lined up and we're ready to go. For the stoppers, I like to use these plastic ones for my kit wines. Now just open the valve and let it flow. Once full, get the stopper on the bottle. Now give it a quick tap and it's on. It's always best to label your wines as soon as you've done them, especially if you're aging your wine for long periods of time. Now I abbreviate the type of wine, which is SB in this case, the bottling date and the volume of alcohol. And if you're interested, here's that alcohol calculation from the readings we took before and after fermentation. Right, for those who are interested, let's work out the alcohol content of this wine from the readings we took with the hydrometer earlier. We take the original gravity reading of 1.080 and deduct the final gravity reading, which was 0.988. That gives us 0.092. All you do now is multiply that number by what's known in the brewing world as the constant 131.25. And that gives you the final alcohol reading, in this case just over 12%. And here's a summary of that calculation. The ABV conclusion at the end simply means alcohol by volume. And there's the first one completed. Carry on bottling until the bin is empty. And there's the last one, and just as I predicted, we've ended up with 28 bottles. Not bad at all. When you take off the initial cost of the equipment needed, which you only fork out for once, you only have to buy the wine kit and sugar. So you end up with quite a good wine that's costing you only around £1 a bottle, about $1.50. And that in my book is excellent value. Not only that, it's a fascinating and interesting hobby. Time for a taste. Now this bottle is exactly the same wine but made 6 weeks earlier. It tastes much better after a few weeks aging. As most of my regular viewers will know, I'm a teetotaler, and that's for health reasons. But I can have a little taste of wine now and again when necessary for testing. And oh yes, that is absolutely delicious. Also, these wines are great for gifts and of course for cooking with. Well, there you go. I hope that's a big thumbs up for my first winemaking video. I think I've covered everything. Let me know in the comments what you think, please guys. And as mentioned earlier in the video, here is the latest list of my Patreon, PayPal and Super Thank You button supporters. And they are Dan Calgero, Kathleen, Sarah Hart, Marcus Hunt, Frank H, Lisa Edmonds, Jens K3250, Lavinia Rawlinson, SDE 247011 and Jeremy Larkin 5867, and there's also one who wishes to remain anonymous. Thanks very much guys, I really do appreciate all that you do in supporting the channel. Well, thank you again for watching. Please like, share, comment and subscribe by hitting the circle above. If you do subscribe, activate the bell icon next to the subscribe button on my channel page. And by doing that, you'll be automatically notified every time I upload a new video. And in the meantime, here's a few of my other videos and playlists that you may want to watch. So, until the next time, be safe in your kitchen, and bye for now.